Okay, so welcome everybody. So today I'm going to talk to you about establishing standards, rules and procedures. I have prepared this presentation, very short presentation in a very short time, just to respond to a request by one of the students in our program, TEFL and ICT. Today I'm going to talk about the ways how teachers can establish standards and rules and procedures for behavior inside the classroom setting, and this is one of the best ways that can be applied by teachers for having a good management of the classes. I have taken a quotation here. As you can see, it is below the title, Standards, Rules and Procedures, which vary in different classrooms, but we don't find effectively managed classes operating without them. This quotation, it shows the great importance of establishing standards, rules and procedures. In this presentation I'm going to be very quick and short, just due to time constraints. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is a kind of introduction, which also shows the relevance and importance and even significance, crucial significance of establishing standard rules and procedures inside a classroom setting. So when more than two people gather in one place, whether it is in a home or in a school, structure is needed. And the foundations of that structure are standards, rules, and procedures. In spite of the fact that most people agree with this, discussing rules and procedures generates feelings of ambivalence and nervousness on the part of many. That is to say, there are teachers, educators who really know the significance of this, but there are others who are still ambivalent and nervous about establishing them. So Fred Jones in Positive Classroom Discipline, published in 1987, page 42, he discusses some very common misconceptions that persist. I have reprinted a few of them here, which are also followed by some comments. The first misconception is that some teachers think or say students shouldn't know or should know how to behave by this time. They probably do know how to behave and have known since the first grade, but they don't know what you will accept. They need to know where you draw the lines, and they will test the limits until you define them clearly. Second misconception is that teachers, a few teachers, some of them, say that I can't take too much time to go over the rules because I have too much content to cover. This is another misconception, because you can't afford to not take the time to do that. The teachers with the most time on task and fewest discipline problems use the first 3 weeks of school to establish the structure so learning can take place. The next misconception is that some teachers think, I announced the rules on the first day. I don't know why they aren't following them. Announcing the rules won't do it. It requires teaching, modeling, and practicing for students to know what is expected of them. Teaching the rules is a matter of being strict. This is not so. Teaching rules lays the groundwork for cooperation based on mutual sharing. Students dislike and resent classroom rules. Students expect, appreciate, and respect a class with order. If your class has no order, you have a tyranny of the few against the many. If I have a lot of rules and procedures, the students won't like them. The reality is quite the contrary. The most predictable characteristics of good disciplinarians are that they are relaxed, warm, and free from the struggle of establishing order. The truth of the matter is, concerning the last misconception, is that the truth of the matter is that students expect the teacher to be in charge. One student, a high school junior, said, I appreciate teachers who don't let you slide, who make students do the work and don't accept excuses. Another high school student stated, teachers gain my respect by the way they control the class. They don't let students speak out of turn or give them passes to leave the classroom for frivolous reasons. They demand that students learn. This is taken from Boykin, 1997. The point is that insufficient standards and procedures cause the loss of large amounts of students' time and interest. It is not possible to teach or to learn without order. What are the standards, rules, and procedures? Standards, rules, and procedures are different, but each of these is needed. They are used not to control students, but to teach them. Rules are not ends in and of themselves, but are the means to organize a class. Management decisions are driven by concerns about instruction, not concerns about control. A well-disciplined person is one who does the right thing without rules, and our goal is to teach self-discipline. Standards, rules, and procedures teach students what they need to learn to function successfully in a classroom community. So, we're going to start by defining each one of these three terms here. We have standards, rules, and procedures. So, the first term is standards. Standards encompass all situations, and the good news is that they are relatively easy for teachers. Behavior standards define clearly the expectations that we have for our students in terms of skills in leadership, citizenship, independence, autonomy, initiative, cooperation, responsibility, and self-discipline. Behavioral standards are the support system for teaching and learning. Some possible standards include students are polite, prompt, and prepared, and students are respectful, responsible, and ready to learn. Standards should be few in number. The fewer, the better. 3 to 5 standards are about right. Some teachers limit it to 1, such as be polite and helpful, or do only those things that help you and others to learn. These kinds of standards cover every imaginable situation. The students cannot find any loopholes. To make them operational, they must be carefully taught, modeled, and practiced. And we're going to come back to this last sentence here in a little bit more detail in the following slides. Rules. Rules are absolute. They cannot be negotiated. They must be followed with precision. Rules are for safety and health issues, things about which there can be no argument. They too are relatively easy for teachers. Some examples of rules include there must be absolute silence during a fire drill. Students must stand completely behind the line while waiting their turn to swing. In an earthquake drill, you must walk quickly and quietly to our place on the playground. Procedures. They are different. They are the accustomed way of getting things done. They are the routines that are necessary for the operation of the classroom. Procedures, unlike standards or rules, are limited to just one behavior and they change according to need. Procedures are what makes standards and rules operational. The bad news is that procedures are very difficult for teachers. There are hundreds of procedures: how to sharpen a pencil, how to head a paper, how to line up, how to carry the cafeteria tray, how to pass in the papers, and so on and so forth. Now, we are going to talk about the guidelines for effective standards, for giving effectively the standards, rules, and procedures, effectively establishing them. Standards, rules, and procedures must be clear. This is the most important rule for establishing rules. A rule must be stated so clearly and taught so well that those affected understand what behavior is expected. The major way to do this is by stating the rules positively, telling the students what to do rather than what not to do. The rule "don't run" does not help students know what they are supposed to do. There are many ways to get from one place to another without running, hopping, skipping, jumping, and walking backwards are a few that come to mind. And each of these will be considered and implemented by one student or another. If you want students to walk slowly, then your procedure is walk slowly. If you want them to walk quickly, then your procedure is walk quickly. You tell them explicitly what you want them to do. We cannot expect them to do what they cannot understand. Standards, rules, and procedures must be reasonable. This guideline has the following 4 criteria. The student must be able to do what you are asking him to do. A standard that says everyone will write in cursive writing is not reasonable until every child can do it. If children cannot do what is required, then you teach it to them. Children cannot be held accountable for what they are unable to do. A standard rule or procedure is unreasonable if you don't need it. If only one child is eating the beans that you put out as counters in the math center, you do not need to establish and teach a rule to the class. It will only call attention to this activity, so others will try it. Sometimes it is better to wait to see if you need a standard behavior you can establish and teach it. The significant learning here is if you have a rule for something, everyone will try it. You just might want to wait to see if a situation emerges that requires a procedure. If it doesn't, don't bring it up. A standard rule or procedure must not run against human nature. A rule that says every child must sit up straight is doomed to failure. This is a rule that seems to be attempting to change the basic nature of the child, something we probably don't want to engage in. Furthermore, there is no reason to have such a rule. Remember that standards, rules, and procedures should only be established because they help students learn better. There is no evidence that sitting up straight will do that. In fact, there is evidence from the learning styles research that many children learn better by lying on the floor. Carbo-Dan and Dan, 1986. A standard, a rule, or a procedure must not take more resources than you can afford to use to enforce it. If it takes every ounce of energy you have, or half the minutes in a day to enforce, then the rule is not reasonable. Standards, rules, or procedures must be enforceable. This basically means that the rule maker can make it happen. If your standard states that all students will be in their seats by 8:15 a.m., but the bus doesn't arrive until 8:20 a.m., the standard is unenforceable. Get rid of it. A teacher who has a standard that every child shares his or her story with the class will have difficulty enforcing it on a very shy child. Good rule makers know there are some things that cannot be enforced by standards, rules, or procedures, and so they avoid having such rules. Now, that's the end of today's short presentation. We hope to continue it in another presentation to continue talking about aspects of classroom management and how to effectively manage one's class. So here I provide some of the references that I have relied on in my short presentations. Thanks very much for your attention and see you next time.